Let's bring in my next guest now, Robert Buckland. Sir Robert Buckland, I shall use his proper title, is the former Justice Secretary, also the Tory MP for Swindon South. Robert, lovely to see you this morning.
Lovely to see you.
You're the perfect person here to just talk about some of the legality, first of all, of this illegal immigration bill. Lord Sumption, who we're having on a little later in the show, said in his judgment in 2013, it is an international obligation of the UK under Article 46.1 of the Convention to abide by the decisions of the ECHR in any case to which it is a party. This obligation is in terms absolute. Can we clarify, can the ECHR block these plans?
If there is a case involving the United Kingdom, those remarks of Lord Sumption's are absolutely right. If it is case law that doesn't involve the United Kingdom, it's not binding. What happened very recently to cause controversy was that there was a decision made by a judge in Strasbourg to, in effect, hold up the policy on Rwanda. It was a particular procedure that's quite a new one that we didn't have a chance to make representations upon, and frankly I would question the basis of it. However, that's very different from saying that there is some overwhelming deep-seated problem here related to our membership of the convention. I'm sorry, but I don't see the evidence here that suggests that withdrawal from the convention will change the nature of this problem. We'll still have domestic laws, domestic judges, rules of fairness that have to apply when people make applications for asylum. That's what we've prided ourselves on. That's the English rule of law system. So I don't think the convention, the European Convention, is the right target here. The problem here is that this is an operational issue that affects all the countries of Western Europe, and none of us are really coming together to set quotas, to set limits, and to try and control the way in which people are either being exploited or choosing to come here via illegal means.
Rishi Sunak and Emmanuel Macron tried to come together in the week. They've obviously set aside a huge amount of money, £500 million on a new detention centre, more patrols. Do you have faith in that? I think GB viewers and listeners will be saying, well, hang on, we've given the French hundreds of millions. What the hell have they done with it?
Yeah, well, I think the money has been spent indeed on detention centres and more provision. But, that's like sort of trying to just fill a hole while at the same time the bottom of the hole is still developing. The real problem here is a lack, I think, of common purpose amongst the countries of Western Europe to say, hold on, we are always going to be able to welcome asylum seekers, but we do need to plan for the future. And not knowing the numbers, not having any control on that, causes strain on schools, hospitals, all the public services, and indeed housing, which of course some of the panel were talking about.
But you talked about quotas there, and then we did have a cap, didn't we, on immigration some time ago, and then the Tories abandoned it. Was that a mistake? Well,
I think we're confusing two things here. I mean, there's general migration, which we control via a visa process. We've got advice on where we have job shortages, and I think it's right that, for example, in health and other areas, we do recruit people to come to this country to help us run our services. But when we talk about asylum seeking and on that side of immigration, that's a different issue. And I think there the government is right to say, let's set a quota in Parliament every year so we can then plan, and local government, local authorities can plan ahead. But at the same time, that sort of approach is only going to work if we do open up some more safe and legal routes internationally to allow more applications to be made from abroad. At the moment, the only schemes are Hong Kong, which is great, Ukraine, absolutely right, Afghanistan, we all understand that, but there's no other way of making an application. I'm not saying open the doors.
I was going to say, Sir Robert, you're all sort of sounding a bit like Lineker here, and you're a Conservative former minister.
I am absolutely against an open door policy. I think this false juxtaposition between comparing, what the government's doing to 1930s Germany, which I think is entirely in it. But when you start talking about the Nazis, you've lost the argument. And then this other argument that if you're against it, you're in favour of open doors. That's bogus. What we should be talking about is increasing safe and legal routes, but up to a certain quota, a certain limit. And I think if all the countries of Western Europe agreed that, that would be progress. I'm realistic here, Camilla. I think we're far away from an agreement. We're having a row with France. France and Italy are having a row about the same thing. And unlike in Ukraine, where we came together to challenge a bully and an illegal invasion, we're failing, I think, as a political leadership in Europe to come together to sort out this problem.
Another row seems to be brewing in the Tory party about children and this bill. Priti Patel has come out today, 2 newspapers have covered it, this concern that actually we may then see a return to children both being detained and deported. You must be very uncomfortable with that.
I am, and I've said so publicly in the newspapers as well. I agree with Priti on this. It's been our policy as a government not to treat children in that inhumane way. Now, I absolutely understand that there's a concern that somehow children and women are being used as a sort of, way in for unscrupulous people to come into this country. But, I think we've really got to think carefully before using detention centres or places of incarceration for children. I just don't think that's right, and I hope that in the course of the debate we can look at that and refine
the government said when they announced this bill that children would be exempt from it. So are we now not believing what they're saying?
Well, I think that some of it might be due to the drafting. Yeah. I think we need to look very carefully as parliamentarians at exactly what they're saying. It was made clear to me, and I think rightly so, that you have to have exemptions for children and the very ill. If you have a total blanket policy, I think any court is going to have a problem with that. And there are exemptions in there, which is why, the government is confident that they are working within international law obligations.
Moving on to Lineker, what should happen to him? I mean, shouldn't he just stand down now and move on? Clearly, he can't keep his views to himself, and he's contravened impartiality rules at the BBC.
Well, it's a matter for him and his employers.
But what do you think?
Look, I think personally, I disagree with the way he said, as I've just said. I think as a private citizen, he's entitled to express his views. We live in a country of free speech and untrammelled free speech, however much we might disagree with it.
It's not about free speech, though, is it? It's about him breaching his contract.
Well, as I say, if I haven't read the terms of his contract, if there are contractual issues with the BBC, he's got to sort that out with his employer. So
should somebody at the BBC be undermining government policy like this? I mean, it's not a great look for the Tories. You've got loads of people piling in on Twitter in support, people holding up banners at football stadia. Doesn't really help the government in trying to crack down on a really difficult problem. Yeah, who does he think he is?
I think that it's best for politicians like me to stop piling in, let the BBC sort out what is an employee issue, and then deal with it in that way. And we should respect the judgment of the BBC. I think the Prime Minister's right about this. Let's not wade into this row. I will defend everybody's right to free speech, even though I might disagree with it, and that includes Mr Lineker. But I really think this is taking the focus away from the sort of serious discussion we just had about the detail of these policies.
Let's just very quickly move on to Joanna Simpson, the tragic case of the wife that was killed by Robert Brown. Now, I know her mother is one of your constituents. Have you got confidence in your successor, Dominic Raab, preventing this man from being automatically released from prison?
Yes, well, lead campaigner Hetty Nanton is my constituent, and Diana Parks is, of course, the mother of her great friend, Joanna. I do. I'm very pleased that the government and ministers have met the campaigners, and I think that whilst we can't prejudge what the final decision is, I think the government is looking at the powers that I introduced to help.
Thank you, Robert Buckland. We'll be back in a bit.